All right, guys, so we're going to get started. Before we do, I just want to show you the React.js website because this is where you can find all the documentation, all the fundamentals, any latest news or updates or anything that has to do with React. So I would definitely recommend bookmarking this in your browser. And if you go to the docs over here under main concepts, you can find explanations about all the different fundamentals of React, like JSX, components and props, state and lifecycle. This is all stuff we're going to be going over, but you can use this documentation kind of as a supplemental learning source. You also have advanced guides here. You have a tutorial, the blog, community. So anything that's going on with React will be on this website. Now, the tool that we're going to use to create basically like a starter app or a boilerplate is called Create React App. And I know a lot of you guys know this stuff, but just realize that this course is also for people that are just learning React. So I will be explaining a lot of the basics in the beginning, especially in this first project. All right, so bear with me, those of you that already know this stuff. So with Create React App, if we say Get Started, it'll show us how we can use it. Now we can install it with NPM if we want, which will install it globally on our machine if we use -G, and then you can run it. However, you can also use npx, which will allow us to just run it without installing it. So that's what we're going to do. So I'm going to create a new folder on my desktop here. This is going to be our first projects folder, and I'm going to call this GitHub-Finder. And I'm going to open this with VS Code. And I notice I have it open on the side here. Close that up. And there's nothing here at all. Now, I need to open up my terminal, and you can use your standard Mac terminal, your Windows command prompt, Linux terminal, whatever you want. I'm going to be using the integrated terminal with VS Code. So you can open that with Control-tilde, you can toggle it, or you can go to the View option in the menu and go to Terminal. So from here, I'm going to run npx, okay, not nox, but npx, and make sure you have Node.js installed. And we're going to run create-react-app. And we could put like the name of a folder. If I put test, it would put it in a folder called test. I want it all in this current folder, so I'm going to put a dot. And what that's going to do is it's going to set up all the initial React framework or library files in this direct folder of GitHub Finder. All right, and then what we'll do is just kind of go over the folder structure and so on, and we'll run the dev server. Okay, so that's now done. So if we go over here to the side, I'm just going to take a quick look at the package.json, which just has the name, the version, all that stuff. But the main things I want to show you here are the dependencies and the scripts. So basically, as far as dependencies, we have React, the library, okay, and then we have something called React DOM, which allows us to basically render our application within the browser, within the document object model. So there's other ways you can use React. For instance, React Native is used for mobile apps, and you don't actually use the DOM, so you wouldn't need React DOM. However, we're working on web apps, so we do need that package. And then React Scripts is kind of the magic behind Create React App. So Create React App does use Webpack, which is a module bundler. It uses, Babel and all that stuff. But it's all behind the scenes, basically. We don't have to deal with it. We don't have to deal with a Webpack config file or anything like that. Now, in rare cases where you do need to dig in and change Webpack options and stuff like that, you can eject from Create React App by running the eject script, but that's beyond the scope of this course. So we also have a start script to start our dev server, which will run by default on port 3000. We have our build command, our build script, that will basically generate our static assets for when we're ready to deploy, and then a test command or test script if we want to run tests. All right, so that's the package.json. Now the next file I want to show you is public index.html, and I'm just going to clear some of this up, these comments here, just so this doesn't look as complicated as it really is. And I'm going to just try to kind of explain how React works. And let's change the title here while we're at it to GitHub Finder. Okay, and I'll save that. So basically we just have an HTML file. React is known as a SPA framework, or a single page application framework. And what that means is that everything is routed through a single file, and this is that file, the index.html. So in here we have just some meta tags, links. You might put maybe a Bootstrap CDN or something like that in here as well. But I guess the most important part, of the part I want you to focus on, is this div right here. So this div has an ID of root, and this is basically where our entire React application is going to output. It's going to output the main app component. So remember, we have a concept of components, and there's something called an app component, or a root component, and that's what's going to output here. And then any component we create, like let's say a nav bar or a user list, whatever it might be, that gets embedded in the main app component, okay? And then that gets output here. Now I'm going to show you how that happens. If we go into our source folder, which is where we create all of our files, components, state, all that stuff goes in source. But I want to look at the index.js. And in here, there's three things I want to focus on that are being brought in. React, which is the main library, React DOM, which again has to do with rendering in the browser, and then the main app component, which is the app.js file. And then here, React DOM has a method called render, and it takes in two things. It takes in what you want to render, which in this case is the main app component that's brought in here, and then where you want to render it in that HTML file, which here you can see we're actually using vanilla JavaScript document.getElementById, and we're looking for an element with the ID of root, which again is right here. So if we change this to app and we change this to app, that should still work because it's just looking for that element. Root is just what Create React app chose to add as an ID. So basically that's what's happening. The main app component is getting output into that HTML, which is rendered all the time. It's a single page application. Okay, so that's the gist of how React works. And then when we're ready to deploy, we don't actually deploy this, this source stuff here. We deploy the static assets that are created when we run npm run build. In fact, I'll do that real quick. So npm run build. I'm going to delete this after, but what happens is it creates a production build, and you can see up here we now have a folder called build, and we have an index.html. This is what actually is going to be deployed, and I know that looks like complete gibberish. Okay, any static files, JavaScript, stuff like that, CSS will be in this folder, but I'm going to just delete that. All right, so now let's go ahead and run the dev server. So to do that, we just do npm start. And it's going to start on 3000, but you can change that if you want. And we get this landing page. Okay, so basically this is the main app component. So I'm going to go back into the code and show you what's going on here. So it's being brought in and then rendered, but let's take a look at app.js. Okay, this is the main app component, and you can see we're bringing in React, we're bringing in the logo, which is an SVG file, you can see over here. And I'm going to clear a lot of this stuff up in the next video. We're also bringing in app CSS, which is basically the global CSS. Okay, so this will render on every page, every component. Let's go back here. And then app, in this case, is a function. Now, components can be functions or classes. In fact, this is very new that Create React app is now using a function for the main app component. It used to be a class. Now, in this project, I'm going to start with class-based functions. So I will be changing this to a class, but towards the end, we're going to turn it back into a function with hooks. Okay, because a class component can have state, and it used to be that functional components could not. However, hooks now allow us to have state within functional components. And if that doesn't make sense at all, don't worry about it. I'm going to explain this stuff as we move along. So inside the function, we're just returning a div, a parent div, that has inside of it a header. It has the logo, some text, links, all the stuff that you saw right here is actually coming from this. Okay, if I were to change, let's see, this says learn React, we'll just say hello world, and I'll save that. It's going to re-render, and you can see now we get hello world. And I don't have to reload the page either. It does it all on its own. All right, so that's the main app components. It's just being exported down here. And then we also have a service worker file to deal with PWAs. We're not going to really get into that. But that's pretty much it. We also have an index CSS that we're going to clear out as well. So that's the main structure of the boilerplate that Create React app creates. So in the next video, I'm going to show you my basic cleanup of this stuff, just so we can, cut stuff out that we don't need. All right, so I'll see you in the next video.